Why did Paul argue so hard against circumcision and then turn around and give Timothy the big snip?
That's a good question, brother.
Let's talk about that today on the Midweek Move. Hello and welcome to the Midweek Move podcast extension. The only place is a podcast where we examine the scriptures in context and ask ourselves what is happening here. Today, ladies and gentlemen, joining me at the bright table of bright lighting is Carlos Renfro. How you doing, man?
Man, good, really good.
I'm glad to have you here today as we continue our journey through the book of Acts.
Yep.
And this is one of those chapters in chapter 15 where there's a lot of like, why are we doing this?
It's one of those, huh?
And so let's jump into this. Just a recap. Last week, we had a whole conversation between Paul and Barnabas with the Jerusalem Council going, hey, we don't need to make Gentiles into Jews. Like
right.
You don't have to force that upon them. It's fine. Everyone chill out. And now we're here in a really interesting situation in Acts chapter 16. And Carlos, if you could just do me a favor, just read a little bit, like 1 through 5 real quick, and let's unpack a really interesting situation.
All right, chapter 16, verses 1 through 5. Paul also came to Derbe and Lystra. A disciple was there named Timothy, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek. He was well spoken of by the brothers at Lystra and Iconium. Verse 3. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. As they went on their way through the cities, they delivered to them for observance the decisions that had been reached by the apostles and the elders who were in Jerusalem. Those decisions we were talking about last week in chapter 15. So the churches were strengthened in faith, and they increased in numbers daily.
All right, cool. So interesting situation taking place here. We have Timothy is very much akin to Paul,
yep.
And then he has a dual citizenship situation taking place.
Yes.
And Timothy, I need you guys to understand some Jewish understanding first off, and that is this. In Jewish culture, if your mother is a Jew and then you're born, then you're a Jew. If your mother was not a Jew, you're born, you're not a Jew. If she converts, you have to make the conversion yourself.
Right. So
we have the situation here with Timothy where his mother was a Jewish woman, but she was also a believer. Her husband, Timothy's father, which we don't know who he was,
right.
we don't know anything about him whatsoever, he was a Greek. According to Grecian law, if your father is a Greek, you're a Greek.
You are a Greek.
And so we have a young man who has dual citizenship, basically, if you will. And for whatever reason, he never got circumcised, which was a sign of your status as a Jew.
Right.
And so the question kind of becomes, why are we snipping him?
Right.
If we just fought to say that you don't have to.
Right. And Paul himself fought to say they didn't have to.
Exactly. And I think the answer lies within what you just read here in verse 3. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in those places, the places they were about to go, for they knew his father was a Greek. There's this aspect about ministry life as a whole where you're coming to present the gospel, and you're coming to present who Christ is, and we have to be functionally aware of what the environment we're walking into.
Right, that's good.
And we don't want to put up an excessive amount of roadblocks. The gospel itself is already offensive.
You say that again.
Like Jesus tells us that we will be hated because of him, not because of ourselves. At least it shouldn't be because of us.
Right.
And this is I get frustrated with some people who, man, they make it their stick to be a certain thing, and then when they're in a bad situation, they get all angry. Well, no, look, you came in here with bad faith.
Right.
You know, these areas that Paul was going into, he understood these people were going to look at Timothy and go, he's an uncircumcised Jew.
Right.
He is not one of us. He doesn't have the right to speak to us. It's not that he's going to talk to Gentiles or Jews who are, who are open-minded.
Right.
These are still people who are still struggling with the idea of not having to follow the full Jewish law in order to be a Christian. So Paul goes, hey, in order to remove some barriers, we're going to make sacrifices.
Right.
We're going to do this thing here. Now, Timothy had to agree to it. It wasn't like he's like, hey, Timothy, and just knocked him out and he woke up. Oh, gosh. No, like he had to agree to the whole situation. Yeah. Because there's a ceremonial aspect to the bar mitzvah. There's a ceremonial aspect to everything. And honestly, that's something we have to do in our own lives. Now, we don't need to go get circumcised. We're going to preach it. Because first off, they know we're not Jewish.
Right, yeah, definitely not Jew. Definitely not a Jew.
So, but one of the things that we do have to do is be mindful there we go into, the ministry we're going into. I remember we're very casual here at the Healing Place. You know, week to week, pastor will wear a hoodie or a three-piece suit. I'm the one wearing jeans, a T-shirt, maybe a long-sleeve shirt of some sort. But we're very relaxed here. As a culture, we just don't care about how you come as long as you experience the presence of Christ. Right. Now, don't come in butt naked, right? You know,
within appropriation,
right? You know, take care of things, but we just, you know, we have our priorities. However, I can tell you this: that if pastor says, "Hey, I'm sending a team to this little country church, we're going to help them out," and they have a culture over there that is a lot more, restrictive as far as clothing, right? We're going to make some changes, right? You know, I will grab a pair of slacks. I'll grab a nice button-up shirt. I will go there because I don't need to put up as many roadblocks in front of things, and that's something that we all have to kind of measure. We have to have discernment about. I remember years ago. I didn't even think about it in this context, honestly. I was looking for a youth pastor position when I first graduated from Nelson University, formerly SAGU, and nobody was hiring me. I applied everywhere, and I was getting depressed. I was genuinely going, God, I feel like I have this calling to serve in a church in this function. Nobody's hiring me. And one of the things that keep coming back from the couple of interviews I had was, I have long hair. That was a kicker for some people. I have a ponytail. That's what it was. And I remember late night just arguing with Lord, going, Lord, what is the deal here? Like you've called me to do this. Why is this a problem? And the Lord's dealing with me. He goes, well, why are they denying you? I was like, honestly, because I have long hair. And he goes, okay. And I'm literally arguing with the Lord. It's like, they're taking scripture out of context. It's okay for men to have long hair. That's not what that passage is about. And he goes, but what are you willing to give up for me? Right. What are you willing to take out of the equation so there's no barrier between the goal that I have for you? And so in the middle of the night, I got up and I cut my ponytail off. Wow. And it was actually kind of funny. The night before, we were actually, there was a hurricane down south. There was a young group of college students who were serving a thing called Master's Commission. Mm-hmm. They came up here and they stayed the night at the church. That night, I'm loading people up. We're getting carried on bunks. The next morning, I come up to church to help out with some stuff. And this one girl looks at me. She goes, Are you Dallas's brother? I was like, I am Dallas.
To everybody, this is a new story to me too. I've known Dallas for a dozen years, and I've never known this story. So please continue.
So, but I made that decision to cut my hair. I was like, because I don't want this to stem between me and what the Lord has for what He has for me. So I made that decision to cut off my ponytail. It was not a clean cut. I had to go get it cleaned up later. Flash forward several months later, and I've probably told you the story before. I got a phone call from the board. Two of the members at the time, our lead pastor had resigned from here. He was going down south to help rebuild a church. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of this weird intermission time frame where we didn't have a pastor. Intermediate time frame? I can't remember. Anyways, and they called me and they say, hey, Dallas, we need to meet with you. I'm like, I'm in trouble. They're going to fire me.
Here goes.
Like, why are they going to fire me? Now, there was a mishap with a printer. I may have had to take it apart and rebuild it a few times because of a major print job. I don't know. So they take me out to eat. We're talking. And they asked me to be our kids pastor here at the Healing Place. I go, what? They're like, yeah, we want you to do kids ministry for us. I've trained for youth ministry, but for the months leading up to this point, I've had a burn for what was taking place here at the church because we didn't have a kids ministry. I didn't realize we didn't have a kids ministry at the time, honestly. Like, no kids pastor, no kids ministry was really happening. And I said yes. And I remember praying about it later, and the Lord says, because I was going, I didn't need to cut my hair. I didn't have to do it. The healing place is fine with me having long hair. But the Lord said to me, but you are willing to sacrifice something for me for this.
Right.
That's why I've allowed this to take place.
It's a thought of God. I need to decrease so that you can increase. And what can I do to give the gospel room to breathe?
Right.
And nobody has to have an excuse of looking at me or my thoughts and not see you.
Exactly. And so so in this situation with Paul and Timothy, Paul's looking at Timothy and goes, hey, Tim, we're about to walk into a place. And I know you don't have to do this. I just fought for you not to have to do this.
Yeah.
But if you do this, it's going to open up more doors for us to preach the gospel. And Timothy had to agree to this. This wasn't a like, hey, you're going to do this. Timothy said, for the sake of the gospel,
I'm willing to do this.
And so he did. And he took on a symbol. First off, it's of his heritage, which is a great thing. And he said, but it was for the sake of the gospel. This is why he got that circumcision done.
What a mature, spiritually and naturally mature thing to do, especially as an adult at that age. As a young man, as an adult at that age, to say, you know what, whatever suffering is in my path is worth it, so that Christ can be seen and can be seen clearly. Right. I don't have to go into these places and argue with these people just to get Christ, and that this is out of the way, and now Christ can be front and center. Exactly.
And a real life example of this there's a story about my hair, but also our good friend Corey, him and Dana, years and years ago, before they got married, they took a mission trip to Cambodia, and Corey had these big old gauged out earrings. I mean, his ears were huge, and he realized that having those when he went on the mission field in the area, there was a cultural meaning behind those that was going to hinder the gospel, and it was a pretty major, pretty taboo thing. So he took his gauges out, and he let his ears heal up before he went on the mission trip, because he didn't want anything to distract from the gospel.
How easy can it be for us to say no to something a decision we've already made? It is not necessarily wrong for us, but there's something bigger that we rather get to and allow the Lord to use us for. And it is easy for us to say no, but giving God an opportunity to say yes can open up a world of good.
Absolutely. So, but yeah. So for context, he didn't want to ask that. He didn't want to answer the question. So I'm the one that answered that question.
Yeah.
So let's continue on, man. Within the passage, what else we got happening here in chapter 16?
Oh, well, we're getting to the point where we have Lydia. She's being baptized, and this opens up something else. I found this passage as we were kind of going through what we were talking about. Is they're now pushing out the gospel to the Gentiles and to other areas, and it just stood out to me. Verse 14, the whole conversion story starts in verse 11, but verse 14 says one who heard, they're talking about and bringing the gospel to these areas. One who heard was a woman by the name of Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was being said by Paul, and after she was baptized, and her household, so not just she was baptized, her household was baptized, she urged us, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay. And she prevailed upon us.
Yeah. So here we have this woman. She's been baptized. Her whole household is.
Right.
And like I said, she's opening her house to this aspect. And, then again, likely this whole being a purple goods person, that was probably in her household. This is where she lived.
In her household.
This is where she worked. So here's a question for you, man. How can we make our homes, our businesses, a place to be used or impact others?
Well, I find this that in our homes and in our business, there's so much, and I think this fast forwards really, really, really well to the modern day.
Yeah.
Especially where we are now, because even then, churches were in homes. But even now, in the modern context, I think this fast forwards really, really well.
Yeah.
That we need far more than just the framework of a service or of ceremonies or house ceremonies or services or what we do on Sunday mornings or Wednesday evenings, however you structure that. We need far more than just a framework of that if we're really and truly going to impact people for the gospel. And God gives us opportunities and God gives us resources in our homes to be able to bring people in,
Right.
to be able, especially you saw that in that passage there, that not only was she baptized, but her entire household was baptized.
Right.
So now we have a functional household of people operating in belief in Christ in this society that's not anchored in the belief of Christ. And now people can come into her household and experience Christ and see what that's like. And also she's able to use her business as a platform, her work as a platform to be able to show Christ and to share Jesus. And even if that comes down to resources, now all of these things from your house and your livelihood isn't just something that's ceremonial, but now all these things are dedicated to the work of God and the work of seeing the gospel, move forward. And you can do that more than just, inside of a church service or what you observe as, okay, this is the religion that I practice, but this is a life that I live.
Yes.
This is a life my family lives. This is a life that I live even as a person when I'm at work. I own and run the business, and I want my business to be a representation of what Jesus is doing.
Yeah.
That when there's credit there, that we can point it back to Jesus. I want my home to be that.
Right.
For years, my household has led small groups and things like that. We want people to come to an atmosphere in our home and be able to see and experience Jesus.
Right.
And even a little bit of a crossover there. The business that I own, my son works for that business as well.
Right.
And so there's this whole dynamic that God is moving in the life of an individual. And it's not just seen at the church house, but it's seen in their home, in the way that they live,
Right.
in the way that they're the people that they are apart from that. And it's also seen in how they work.
Right.
And even, if God is able to bless a business with resources, I want those things to go to blessing the kingdom as well.
Right.
So it's a whole dynamic that God, you're a part of everything that I do, not just a part of a ceremonial act of worship, but my whole life is an act of worship.
Right. Absolutely. I appreciate that you said the words, my whole life is an act of worship, because I feel like that some people, they miss out on the fact that everything we do is an act of worship unto God in some fashion. And it's we have an idea of worship here in the house, in the church, where we sing songs, we're doing these things, but there's also the things that we do in your household, the way you lead your family, the way that you create an atmosphere of peace in the presence of God.
That's good.
That pours out there. That's an act of worship. But then also into your business realm, you carry that out there also into the business world when you are meeting with clients, when you're doing different stuff. There's a sense of peace that they should experience with you. There's the presence of God they should experience with you. Not that you're out there every time you walk in, bless God, this is what the Lord has for you.
Right.
If the Lord gives you a word, go for it.
Right.
But it is a matter of people going, man, there's something different about working with you.
On the inside.
Right. And you're able to go, look, man, all glory goes to Christ.
Right.
Point it back to him. Now, if you're put up the front and like, bless God, and you're just a heathen, that's another another conversation.
That's a whole other conversation.
But there is a level. It's being a Christian and it coming out in your business. It's more than just putting a little Jesus fish on your logo. It's living it out in front of people.
Yeah, I haven't put that on my logo on purpose, man, because I don't want to be seen that, oh, here's the fish guy. I'd rather be seen in the way that we do business, in the way that we operate, and how we treat people, and what our ethics are as a company. That it does give an opportunity to point those things to Jesus.
Well, and even like you look at Lydia, it doesn't say that she was it doesn't tell us what her life was afterwards. They called her Lydia, a seller of purple goods. She was a businesswoman.
Yeah.
This is something that she did, that this is what she was known for, but now it was so much more because of what she did beyond that.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Now we get to this last bit here, 16 through 40. Paul and Silas are basically thrown in jail. Walk us through this, Carlos. What takes place? How did they end up here? I mean, they're preaching the gospel, everything's doing good. But how do they end up in jail?
Well, I'm thinking at this point that there's no internet at this time, so nobody's like sending like emails or text messages at this point. But at this point, I'm thinking that Barnabas and Mark are glad that they didn't go with Paul and Silas at this point. Now they ended up in this situation because there's a young slave girl who bought her masters, her handlers, a lot of fortune by fortune telling, by using a demonic spirit basically to through divination, use a demonic spirit basically to do spooky and cool looking things and use parlor tricks and demonization to bring them money. You know, she was doing psychic fortune telling and all those things that we have to tell people not to do.
Right.
You know, and stay out of that on
She
your
was Miss
TikToks.
Cleo for real.
Yeah, she was real Miss Cleo. And
That's a throwback for somebody.
That's a real throwback. If you got that reference, go and schedule your doctor's appointment. Okay. If you got that reference, you're overdue for your doctor's appointment. And basically, this woman followed out their pestered ministry, you know, and they got tired of it. They cast a demon out of her. They gave her the ability to do those things.
Right.
Well, this caused some problems with her handlers, and her handlers made sure that because they had just lost their source of income, because Paul and Silas were spiritual enough and godly enough to see what was at work here, deal with the spiritual aspect of it, that they were able to get them in trouble for causing problems. And they kind of lied on them. They if I can find it, they basically drug them for the magistrates, and they kind of accused them of being violators of the laws of Rome.
Right. Telling the people to do things that violate the law of Rome.
Yeah. These guys, because they cast this demon out of the girl, these guys are teaching things that are in violation of the laws of Rome. And they basically got Paul and Silas not just arrested, but beat up, arrested, and thrown into prison.
Right. So they get thrown into prison, and something miraculous takes place. This is what I love about this story. They're there, being Paul and Silas.
Yep.
And almost with the conversation we talked about before, and they glorified the Lord when they were out walking and in prison.
Yes.
They're worshiping the Lord.
Yeah, verse 25, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them.
Yeah. And then suddenly there's this massive earthquake that takes place, and it shakes everything, and everyone's chains are freed up.
Everybody.
And we get down to verse 27. The jailer woke up, saw the prison doors were open, and he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoner had escaped. Now, this is important to understand that this is diametrically tied to his livelihood.
Yep.
If he had failed at this job, it was on him.
Right. The key words that the jailer woke up.
Yeah.
Because he shouldn't have been asleep.
Exactly. He should have been asleep. And then also you had the fact that the earthquake took place. It's like, there's a lot taking place here. And so he was like, because if basically it's a blood for blood thing, it's going to be on him and his household.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I will take the sword for the sake of my family as a whole because of what's taking place here. Paul will see this. It says in verse 28, cried out, "Do not harm yourself. We are all here." I picture this scene of, I forgot what movie. It's this old black and white movie. And, but this one character, he's walking off set, and you hear him run into a bunch of trash cans. He's like, "I'm okay."
Yeah.
And actually, what actually happened is he walked off set and he ran into a rack of film canisters.
Oh, wow.
And he just played it off real quick, and they just kept in the scene there because it just fit so perfectly. But I just picture like this guy going, "Oh my gosh," and Paul's like, "Hey, we're still here." It's all right.
Yeah. He's getting ready to do himself harm.
So the jailer, though, he says the jailer called for lights, rushed in, trembled with fear, and fell down before Paul and Silas. When they saw, then he brought them out. "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" He understood that there's something different about these guys.
There's something supernatural that's happened here.
Exactly. And we mentioned this last week. We're going to mention it again. I'm going to read this very clearly. What do we need to do? What do we need to be saved? Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household.
Yeah.
Simple, plain simple. Boom. Here it is.
I love how, even going back to verse 25, when Paul and Silas were singing hymns, the Bible says that, and the prisoners were listening to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that the Lord, not only did it show an attitude of their worship and their praise, but I believe that the Lord made sure that the rest of the prisoners heard what was going on. Mm-hmm. So when the miracle happened, they had nothing to point it back to other than what they had just heard. That this is something that is happening because of the faith of these two men who are probably doing the exact opposite thing that the rest of the people who are in prison were doing. That this whole thing is being initiated by God.
Yeah.
That not just the jailer, not the other prisoners are able to see that there are men in here worshiping their God, and their God moved.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does highlight their view of things. Again, they're in jail, but they're like, Lord's going to do something. Lord's going to move here in some fashion. They don't know what it's going to look like. You know, we know that they already had a mentality that we may die.
Yeah, it could be it.
We could be the next martyrs. You know, I think Paul legitimately walked every day with that thought process. Okay. We talk about the thorn in the side of Paul. We don't know what that was. I've heard some people suggest perhaps it was guilt for the death of Stephen, because he was there and the burden of all that stuff that he carried. But they knew that this could be it. Yeah. And they were okay with that. Yeah. They just knew that they're going to glorify Christ no matter the situation.
Life or death.
Exactly. Now, fortunately, they didn't die just yet.
Not yet.
A whole family gets saved here at the bottom of it. And so they do this. He brought them into the house, set food before them, and he rejoiced along with the entire household that he had believed in God. This is what the Lord can do in our lives if we just trust him. And I think it shows so much more that they didn't think about themselves.
Yeah.
They thought about the bigger picture of everything around us. I said this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast that I think that we would be so much more functional at presenting the gospel if we stopped thinking about how we look,
right,
or what's going to happen to us, and we come to presenting the gospel with the mindset of there's somebody here that they're going to hear this, it's going to change their lives.
Yeah. There are eternal things that are at play when we're talking about the gospel, and what we think of as a consequence could be a blessing from God.
Yeah,
and because we just can't always see the mind of God, we just can't always see what He's doing spiritually. We don't know what that jailer was going through before this choice encounter, where he ended up on the shift and on the rotation, where he was dog tired, probably shouldn't have been asleep, but his life was getting ready to change because they had brought Paul and Silas into that prison.
Right.
His life, his family's life was getting ready to change because he was the guy that was on shift when that thing happened.
Yeah.
When it looked like it was going to be a consequence for him, it turned out to be a blessing, and not just a blessing for his household, but an eternal one.
Exactly. All right, Carlos, any last thoughts on the chapter as a whole for our listening audience here?
Well, don't be afraid to sacrifice. If it points toward Christ in the end, God knows why, He knows how. And also those things that feel like there are difficulties could be a setup for what the Lord is doing. I mean, as long as you're in the right mindset and the right will of God, you're doing what He's told you to do. The obedience could produce things that feel unfavorable in the natural. Yeah. But God has a plan.
Absolutely. Well, guys, want to hear from you guys. How can we pray with you? How can we encourage you? Reach out to us. MediaHub@thpshreveport.com is our email address. If you have questions about the Healing Place, you can email us, or you go to our website, thpshreveport.com, where you can find information about all the things we have taking place here. And finally, I want to remind you guys, we are a real-life church that meets every Sunday at 10 o'clock and every Wednesday at 6:30, 8957 Kingston Road here in Shreveport, Louisiana. Until next time, have a great week.